Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We're going to kick it off with Mayor Arulampa. Mayor?
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Lieutenant Governor and Governor. Thank you to everybody here at Ford City Works. As you all know, I love this place. This is my neighborhood spot. This is my neighborhood grocer. For so many years, there was no real fresh food option in this neighborhood, and this innovative model for creating food in a neighborhood, in a food desert, in a city that lacks grocery stores has been so impactful for so many members of our community. So thank you for everybody who works here. We really appreciate you, and to Ben, my good friend, for all you do, and to Julio and Sama, who have for decades been fighting for the small businesses along Park Street, who are struggling because so many folks in our community are struggling with rising costs, rising prices. So many of our residents are struggling with affordability. And in the midst of an affordability crisis, maybe the worst thing you could do is go and make everything more expensive. And you know, you've seen on the news that these tariffs will lead to more expensive cars and electronics, and all of those things are true and important, but it's going to mean that the price of our groceries, which is already so hard for so many people in communities like this to afford, so hard for people who have 5 kids living in this neighborhood, and people, you know, all over this neighborhood to afford. It is so devastating for our families. And what you have here is a state in which the governor and this legislature and our local leaders are committed to affordability for families. And so we're not here to make a political statement, we're here to make a human statement. This is enough for our families. They have borne as much as they can, and we need to do everything we can to make the price of basic groceries more affordable. The governor and I just yesterday were in the north end of Hartford announcing a major investment in home ownership, a major investment from the state, a historic investment in creating home ownership in black and brown families. And I worry about what the cost of wood and steel is going to look like in the years ahead, and whether we will be able to meet those goals. To build the kind of communities we're trying to build, to desperately fight against the tides of the rising costs of housing. This is going to impact every aspect of people's lives. And we are pushing back because this governor, this lieutenant governor, this political administration cares so deeply about the humans who live in this city, about the people who live in communities all across the state, and wants to provide for the families that are under our care. And we're asking the president to show the same level of care and dignity and respect for ordinary, hardworking Americans all across this country and here in the state of Connecticut. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for having me here, and thank you for doing it here in the best grocery store in the state. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. Next, we'll hear from Ben Dubois.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Governor, Lieutenant Governor, Mayor, those who are with us. Thank you for being here. My name is Ben Dubois. I'm the Executive Director for Ford City Works, who owns and operates the Grocery on Broad, as well as Fire by Forge, as social enterprises here in the Frog Hollow neighborhood, integrated with our job training program, but also about affordable food access within our neighborhood. So this grocery store has been here for just under a year. And it's a model that we hope is a reproducible one and scalable throughout different neighborhoods and throughout the state, potentially, to provide affordable food access. We use a fair pricing model, so people pay a different amount based on their income when they come in. And so many of the people that utilize this store are folks who are trying to stretch their dollars to simply put food on the table for their families. And it's already a stretch in today's economy. We know that based on the cost of eggs. We understand that from running a restaurant. We understand the impact of that, but also about just putting food on the table. And so the thought that food prices are going to continue to go up means that more and more families will struggle to put healthy, wholesome, real foods on their table. And we know that that has incredible impact, negative health consequences, negative consequences in terms of education, negative impact on neighborhoods, and just well-being in general for folks. And so I'm grateful to have leaders in our state putting a spotlight on this issue and the importance of it. And to reiterate what the mayor said, this is really not a political issue. I always think that, you know, a bird has a left wing and a right wing and needs both to fly, right? This is not about politics. This is about a human issue that every family that every child, that every person deserves the capacity to put healthy, wholesome food on their table, and should be able to do that. And we're concerned as we look at particularly our produce and other things that the tariffs, particularly on Canada and Mexico, are going to increase prices in ways that will be detrimental to people, to our neighbors, to this neighborhood, and is going to be problematic for a state that we already have 1 in 8 people struggling with food insecurity. And so again, I'm so grateful to the leadership, Governor, that you've had, and for all the folks here about putting a spotlight on this issue and making sure we get on the solution side, and what that means for our state and our neighborhood and our people. So thank you for being here, and thank you for your leadership.
Great, thank you, Ben. Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce myself. This is always the challenge when you both MC and speak at an event. But Dan O'Keefe, Commissioner of Economic Development. I'm going to comment just briefly on our economy and what I think this means for our economy, and then what we're trying to do about it. So first, on the economy, 2024 GDP numbers just came out. And if you look at the last 3 years, time post the pandemic, our economy is doing incredibly well. We were the 17th fastest growing state in the region. That's faster than any other state in the region. 17th fastest growing state in the country, which is faster than any other state in the region. Fastest relative growth we've seen in almost 20 years. So economies are complex. Ours is a $350 billion economy. That is complex, but at some level, they're incredibly simplistic. There are 4 things. It's consumer spending, it's business investment, it's government spending, it's net exports. And if you look at what's happening right now, all 4 are under pressure. Business investment is slowing because businesses can't predict the future. This is a volatile, unpredictable environment. Tariffs are on, tariffs are off. There might be exclusions, there might not be. They may be broad-based. Very hard environment to invest against. Consumer sentiment, lowest in 12 years. Consumers are pulling back because they don't know what the future holds. Government spending is getting cut left and right. And now with these tariffs, net exports are going to come under pressure. BCG estimates that just in the tariffs that have already been announced, forget about what's going to happen tonight, already been announced, it's $5 billion in incremental cost to our businesses. So this is going to put a lot of pressure on our economy and possibly tip us into recession. So what are we doing about it? We did announce strategic supply chains. This is a $25 million initiative to help repatriate production capacity in the United States. We've received over 100 applications for that program. We're still working through finalists, but an incredible response to that. But I just want to send this message that this kind of protectionism, these kinds of tariffs, they will get passed on to consumers in higher prices. This will be inflationary at a time where, as the mayor said, our folks are already struggling. So protectionism is not something that we think is the right long-term solution. And we'd love to see the president moderate that stance. With that, I will close, and I can pass it off next to Julio Mendoza.
Good morning to all. Thank you, Commissioner, Governor, Mayor. Thank you. If you would have asked me in 2019 that what has happened in the last 5 years, I would say you're having a big nightmare. But that's what has happened to our small businesses and our communities. If it wasn't because of grant dollars that were available from the federal government, from the state, DECD, from the city of Hartford, and other cities, a lot of them would not have survived. As they're coming out of COVID and things are getting a little better, then comes the high prices and the issue now with immigration. That has really affected our small businesses. We started doing a study a couple of weeks ago, and we have preliminary numbers. The ones that have been affected the most are the restaurants. A lot of them has been affected, about 50%. Grocery stores have been affected around 35%. Barber shops have dropped sales about 30%, and other retailers about 30%. And the problem is that we don't know how far that will go. It is something that, incredibly enough, is affecting our small businesses. Our small businesses are the heart of the economic structure of the country. And if something doesn't happen soon, a lot of these businesses could close on top of the ones that closed during COVID. So we're hoping that there's things that we can do to help them. We're also letting our merchants know that they have to have, let's say, a point of sale system. They have to sell online because they can't stop and just expect everyone now to come to the door. So we're trying to do certain things. We're doing some trainings to the merchants for that, and we're hoping that things will get better, but we fear that it will get worse. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Julio. Next up is the Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you, Dan. Look, we know families across our state are struggling with very high prices for food, housing, energy, and so much more. So to be here at this moment when the president is proposing more tariffs, it's a very scary thing for Connecticut because our two biggest trading partners are Canada and Mexico. So last year, Connecticut sent $2.3 billion worth of goods. Connecticut goods went to Canada, $2.3 billion, and Connecticut sent $1.6 billion of goods to Mexico. Meanwhile, we get so much of our fruit and vegetables from Mexico and Canada. In fact, we get 51% of our fruit from Mexico, and we get 69% of our vegetables from Mexico, and from Canada we get 20% of our vegetables. So we were just looking around this grocery store. So this avocado, these raspberries, many of the squashes you see here, they're all from Mexico. I'm somebody that goes grocery shopping every weekend at Aldi's and Stop and Shop, and I've already seen prices go higher. And when we impose more tariffs, it means that our trading partners are likely to retaliate, and that's just going to make food prices even higher at a time when people are struggling. And it's already been noted that 1 in 8 adults are food insecure, and 1 in 7 of our kids are hungry. So I'm hoping that cooler minds will prevail, because this is literally a matter of feeding our families. So thank you so much. And somebody who is laser focused on making things more affordable in our state is our Governor, Ned Lamont.
Thanks, Susan. Tariff is a 6-letter word for tax. It's a tax on you. It's a tax that kicks in tomorrow. The president likes to call it Liberation Day. It's really tax day. It is tariff day. And the only thing being liberated is your wallet's going to be liberated of $100 to $200 a month once these taxes, these tariffs kick in. And as you heard, here we are at the grocery store on Broad, doing everything we can to make fresh produce affordable for each and every one of you. Move fast, because it could get more expensive very soon. Look, I'm a basketball fan. I'm looking forward to the game on Friday night. I like a little guac with my chips, but you better go get the guac today, because it's going to get a lot more expensive in a few days. And by the way, that goes for the tequila and lime as well. That all comes from Mexico. And you got to pay attention. Look, Ben does everything he can to make sure our local farms are taken care of. When fresh produce, farm to table, this is why you come to the grocery abroad. But this time of the year, you need Mexico to help produce some of this and make sure we have fresh produce right here for each and every one of you. And this is going to impact all facets of our Connecticut economy, as you heard, Dan say. Look, the price of power drills and tools is going to go up, and much of that comes from overseas. Price of jet engines is going to go up about $200,000 per engine. You know why? Because so much of those parts come from overseas, well, in this case, mainly Canada. And by the way, we are also an exporting state. We export an awful lot of aerospace to places like Canada. That's going to get more expensive, and probably a little less trade going on. We've seen this movie before. It was called Smoot-Hawley. That was an across-the-board 20% tariff that was going to save the economy. Over 60% of trade stopped dead in its tracks. This was back in 1930. At the same time, retaliatory tariffs were kicked in place, making life a lot more expensive and making the Great Depression of the 1930s worse and tougher than it had to be. Look, I'm talking every day, as is Dan, working with our major manufacturers. They're trying to secure their supply chain, making sure they can keep going. But this incredible uncertainty, one day the tariffs are on, one day they're off, we'll see what they are tomorrow. That puts everybody in a stop position right now. Most investors and a lot of folks are going to wait and see what the future may be. And right now, if tomorrow is as bad as they say it's going to be more expensive for our big businesses, more expensive for small businesses, more expensive for the grocery abroad, and a lot more expensive for you, and that's why we're standing here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Governor. Does anyone have any questions?
Can you and the governor elaborate on which sectors you think of Connecticut's economy can be turned the most in? The governor just mentioned aerospace. Is it aerospace, or are there other sectors you're really clear about?
We mentioned some of the data, but if you look at tariffs again that have already been announced, about 70% of our imports are in geographies that are under target. That was the $5 billion number I estimated. If you look at some of what those actual materials are, it's transportation equipment, it's steel, it's some of the real core inputs into our manufacturing sector. So to answer your question, which is which ones will be hit the hardest, it is all of them. I mean, we're talking about really rising input costs across our entire economy. Now, I mentioned in my remarks, one of the things that's introducing uncertainty is what might be excluded, what might not be excluded. And we'll just have to see. We're seeing the same thing everyone else is, that some of this is suggested to be broad-based, which means everything's impacted, and some of it may be more targeted. We'll just have to see.
Can you talk about the lumber from Canada? I understand that could be a big concern for people building homes and fixing homes.
Yeah. Keep rolling? All right, I'll keep rolling. So the question was about lumber and housing. Look, we've got a housing shortage in this state. The good news is our population has been increasing. The bad news is input costs, because of inflation, made housing more expensive. If you look at the rate of housing, 22, 23, it had doubled in terms of accelerated of net new housing growth. And 2024, I've seen preliminary numbers, it's going to be down dramatically. And I fear now with the cost of lumber going higher, it could be down even further. Very difficult to build something when its core inputs are getting more and more expensive. So unfortunately, I do think that is going to put downward pressure on housing growth.
Is there anything Connecticut can do to mitigate some of this damage?
So the governor has announced $800 million invested in housing as part of this next budget proposal. He's proposed another $800 million in housing support. So the question was, is there anything we can do? And the answer is yes, and we're already doing it.
One thing we're doing, Sue, is we put aside $25 million. We're doing outreach to companies around the world, including India, where Dana and I just came back from, saying, over a period of time, if there's a possibility you want to try and come to the United States to avoid some of these tariffs, Connecticut is a pretty good place for you to be, and we're going to make it easier for you to do that.
So you're trying to solicit business from countries that are not affected by the tariffs?
We're trying to solicit business from companies all over. Those that are going to be most directly impacted by the tariffs, Sue, would be probably the most likely to want to get closer to the supply chain. A lot of that's in aerospace here because they're closer to the OEMs.
Have you received any, would you consider any serious expressions of interest about coming here, coming to Connecticut because of the tariffs?
I'll start. I mean, when Dan and I were over there, there was a great deal of interest, but you don't know. I mean, it takes you 4 or 5 years to relocate, say, a factory or pharma manufacturer here, and you could have a new administration. We could be free trade again in 5 years. So they can't hop on every latest tariff initiative.
But you're talking, you just described the conversation with Indian companies saying, hey, come here, sort of avoid these tariffs. It's sort of Trump theory of all this, right? Is that they'll want to relocate to the United States and have access to our markets and avoid these broad-based tariffs.
Yeah, but like I said, They see this as maybe a 4-year thing that takes you many, many years to make this change if they want to take that initiative. The bigger thing, Mike, is they also want to get closer to our manufacturers, so you have less supply chain costs as well. That was the other reason we were over there.
Governor, can you expand on the 200,000 per jet engine? Does that also spill down to the subcontractors and the other suppliers?
Absolutely. These are hundreds, thousands of companies in the aerospace supply chain. But you look at the billions of dollars that Pratt and other companies, import parts from Canada. If that has a 20% surcharge on it, that's going to go right through the supply chain.
And that's mostly a Canada situation as opposed to, you have mentioned Mexico on that specific thing. The parts they get, a lot of them are from Canada.
I think that's right.
Governor, you mentioned the on-again, off-again nature of these tariffs, the uncertainty that's causing. It's also causing uncertainty in the stock market. Can you just talk about how that's impacting budget talks? Obviously, we rely heavily on tax revenue from investors in the stock market.
This herky-jerky policy on, off, let's renegotiate, this could be a great time to be a lobbyist down in Washington, D.C., because every lobbyist is trying to get exemptions from the tariff for their particular product. As it impacts the state of Connecticut, we look at the overall economy very carefully, always worried about the possibility of recession. The possibility of recession is up more today than it's been in some time, in part because of the pause. A lot of companies say, maybe I won't invest right now until I see the dust settle. And obviously, every day we get hit by another surprise from Washington, D.C., be it education funding or, public health funding. We'll see what happens next.
Speaking of those two, education and public health funding, what is the latest as far as you and your budget team looking at that? That we're talking about a fairly solid amount of money in those categories.
Yeah, we're looking at all the hits we've had so far, costing them out. I think we know what that is. Let's say in the case of public health, that was not a forever grant. That was a grant that was going to go for another couple of years. So we can maneuver around a lot of this. Not everything is critical, and we can't afford possibly to repay every dime that the feds could take away from us. We are trying to set our priorities, Chris, and make sure we make that the most vulnerable are taken care of.
We'll break and then do our copies.
Any questions for Susan?
Your name again?